All right, show of hands. How many of you ever walked into a meeting and you already know how it's going to go? Same people, same opinions, same tension sitting in the room before anyone even says a word. You're trying to move something forward, a project, a rollout, a decision, and instead it feels like pulling teeth, like navigating personalities, priorities, and just enough friction to slow everything down. Nobody's wrong, nobody's bad at their job, but somehow it's still hard. That's what we're going to talk about today on Chips and Chalk. How to navigate these situations and this tension and still get high quality results. Welcome to Chips and Chalk, where we talk real K-12 technology. Not the sales pitch, not the conference version, what actually works in schools. I'm your host, Adam Swinchock, and I spent a career leading technology K-12 environments. And if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that the gap between what's promised and what actually happens in a school district is massive. This podcast is about closing that gap. All right, my fellow K-12 leaders and teachers, this is a tough one. Not because it's complicated, but because it hits home. We all have a story, an interaction, or a personal blind side that still stings when we revisit it. Professional conflict, or friction as I call it, is always present. And I'll be upfront with you. This is something I've struggled with at many times. Working with people you don't fully align with, or people you just don't always agree with, or if we're being honest, you just don't click with. And the reality is, some of us deal with this more than others. And if you're newer to K-12 leadership, and you haven't really experienced it yet, it's coming. It's only a matter of time. Because the higher you go, the more decisions you're part of, the more competing priorities you're balancing, the less likely it is that everyone is going to agree with you. There's often a famous quote attributed to Steve Jobs that fits here. If you want to be liked by everyone, go sell ice cream. Don't be a leader. For many of us, the natural reaction may be to try and prevent tension. But understand this, though. Tension is a healthy part of the process. It means people are engaged. It means people care. It means people are invested. And ideally, it means people are passionate about getting the best outcome for their staff, for their students, and for their families. And honestly, this is the kind of thing that should be part of every K-12 tech leadership training program because it's a huge part of the job. Conflict resolution. Not in the dramatic sense, I'm not going to win an Oscar or anything, but in a constant, everyday way. You're working with departments that don't always fully understand the limitations of the technology or the capabilities of it. And at the same time, they're being asked to change how they work. And people don't naturally love change, even when it's the right move. Even when it makes things better, there's hesitation, there's concern, sometimes there's fear. So you're not just implementing systems, you're navigating people, and that's where things get really hard. Now, I chose this topic for a reason at this time period. We're heading into that time of year, the end of the school year, moving into the summer months, when budgets are getting finalized, projects are being locked in, and plans for next year are being buttoned up. This is where the rubber meets the road, where ideas turn into execution, and things get across the finish line for the sake of the teachers and the students that actually matter. Because here's the truth. You don't get to pick your team all the time. You don't get perfect alignment, and you definitely don't get ideal conditions. What you get is different priorities, different personalities, different definitions of success, and a whole lot of pressure to make things work anyway. Take something simple as kindergarten registration. On the surface, that feels really straightforward. Enroll students, welcome families, get them ready for school. Easy, right? Not even close. Because behind that one outcome, you've got dozens of different priorities happening at the same time. IT is focused on online enrollment forms working and data passing cleanly to your SIS. Building clerical staff are focused on data accuracy and being the first friendly face families interact with. Principals are thinking about class sections, staffing, and creating positive first impressions. Transportation is building routes and balancing capacity to make sure they have enough buses. Communications is crafting messaging that sets the tone for the district. Kindergarten teachers are thinking about relationships, meeting students, and calming nervous families. Families just want to feel welcome and not overwhelmed in their first real school experience. The superintendent is looking at the big picture, community perception, and a smooth rollout. The business office is watching enrollment numbers for budgeting and staffing decision. Everyone is working to the same goal, getting families enrolled and create a great first experience. But everyone is pulling from a different angle, different pressures, different timelines, different definitions of success. And sometimes the workloads aren't evenly distributed. Some teams are in the thick of it every day, while others engage at key points along the way. And that can create its own layer of tension. And that's where the professional tension starts, not because people are difficult, but because priorities are different, and nobody's wrong. Alignment doesn't just happen. It's not something you declare in a meeting like you would shotgun in a car ride, and suddenly everyone's on the same page. It's work, and it's hard work, especially when you're working with type A personalities, high achievers, strong leaders, people who are used to being right, and people who care deeply about their lane. Because those are the people in the room. And that's a good thing. But it also means everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a perspective. And everyone believes their way makes the most sense. So alignment becomes less about agreement and more about management. Managing expectations, managing communication, personalities, emotions, including yours. Because if you don't actively manage it, it doesn't stay neutral. It drifts into frustration sometimes, into silos, and into my lane versus your lane. There have been times when I've walked into meetings already frustrated, where I knew the conversation wasn't going to go well, where I felt like we were talking past each other. And if I'm being honest, there were times I didn't handle it well. Short answers, less patience, more focused on being right than being effective. And that never helps anything. It just makes the tension heavier and the work a heck of a lot harder. So I've had to learn, sometimes the hard way. This isn't about agreement, it's about outcomes. You can disagree on the approach, the timeline, the tools, even the philosophy, but you still need clarity on the one thing. What are we trying to accomplish, and are we committed to getting there? Because here's where things go sideways fast. When professional tension turns into personal behavior. Dragging your feet, holding back, side conversations, quiet resistance, waiting for someone to fail so you can say, I told you so. That's not tension anymore. That's sabotage. It's not professional either. And in a school environment, that doesn't just impact a project. It impacts classrooms, it impacts teachers, and it impacts kids. And you essentially have two options when it gets to this point. You can not work through it, or you can pivot and understand exactly what's happening and get everything corrected. Let's talk about the flip side of it. What happens when you don't work through professional tension? Because ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It just changes how it shows up. When tension isn't addressed, it doesn't stay on the surface. It goes underground. And when it goes underground, it has the potential to destroy an initiative, or in the long run, even a team. It turns into miscommunication, assumptions, passive resistance, and even worse, breakdowns in trust. Research in organizational psychology shows that unmanaged conflict, especially when it becomes personal instead of focused on the work, leads to lower performance, less collaboration, and reduced trust. It's not conflict that hurts the team. It's how the conflict is handled. Task conflict can improve outcomes. Relationship conflict destroys them. And you see this play out in real ways. Weekly leadership meetings that turn into, here's everything that went wrong last week. That's not alignment. That's defensiveness. Or worse, meetings where everything is quote unquote fine. No issues reported, no concerns discussed, because raising a problem is seen as weakness instead of collaboration. In both cases, the work suffers. And in schools, you don't always have to see it loudly. You see it quietly. Less collaboration, slower responses, people just disengaging. Unmanaged tension doesn't explode. It quietly breaks things down over time. So how do I do that? What actually works here? You've got to separate the person from the problem. I know it's hard sometimes, but being the leader, and let's be honest here, a fully functioning adult, you have to be able to keep your eye on the prize. Get clear on the outcome, document decisions, commit once a decision is made, debate hard, but execute harder. Now, for the teachers in the room, you may have tuned me out altogether. Like, this doesn't pertain to you. But in reality, you have the ability to do what is called leading from the middle. I know you've at times felt like the district doesn't get it, or admin isn't listening. Sometimes you're not wrong, but they're balancing more than you see. Also, many a times what you're asking for isn't clear. So influence differently, not louder, clearer. That doesn't mean repeat yourself. And it definitely doesn't mean forcing your point. Clear means instead of saying, this rollout isn't working, you say, here it's where it's breaking down. Teachers are losing 10 to 15 minutes of instructional time at login, and that's creating frustration right out of the gate. Instead of, we need better support, you say, we're seeing repeated tickets on the same issue, which tells us that there's either a training gap or a system problem, and we need to decide which one it is. Instead of saying, the system is confusing, you say, from a user perspective, there are too many steps to complete a simple task, and that's where we're losing people. See the difference? Clear communication defines the problem, explains the impact, and points it towards a direction without making it personal. Because when you're vague, people fill in the gaps, or they just ignore it altogether, and they usually don't fill them in the way you want to. When you're clear, you reduce assumptions, you reduce defensiveness, you increase the chance of alignment. And in environments with professional tension, clarity is one of the most powerful tools you have. And you already do this every day. You may just not realize it. You're doing it with parents. You're constantly giving them clearer instructions on what you expect from them and their students in the classroom. So don't feel like this is anything foreign to what you're currently already doing. Now, if we go back through this segment and we take a look at everything and we run through all these scenarios and we continue to work on everything that we've been working on, and things just still seem to be a problem. In fact, maybe some of the things that we talked about that shouldn't happen are starting to happen. And it's not just happening a little bit, it's happening all the time. This is a different kind of tension, not the healthy kind, not the we're working through something kind. I'm talking about perpetual friction. This is the kind of environment where every conversation feels like a setup, every meeting feels like a test, and every decision feels like it's being second guessed before it's even made. It shows up as a gotcha culture almost. Constant headbutting, people keeping score, conversations that feel more like positioning than problem solving. And here's the key difference in it. This isn't about the work anymore. It's about something underneath the work. And it might be the lack of trust, competing agendas, unspoken resentment, leadership misalignment at the top, somebody got a job over someone else. Whatever the issue is, doesn't get addressed directly. So it shows up indirectly in tone, in meetings, and how people respond or don't respond. And when you're in it, you definitely feel it. You start walking into meetings guarded. You think twice before speaking. You spend more energy managing the room than actually solving the problem. And that's the trap a lot of strong leaders fall into. They think, oh, if I just work harder, communicate better, or prove my value, it's going to fix the problem for me. Sometimes that's true, but not always. Because if the environment itself is built on defensiveness, lack of trust, or hidden agendas, no amount of individual effort fixes it. So how do you know if it's crossed the line? There's a few signals. You're having the same conflicts over and over with no progress. Your feedback feels inconsistent or political. Wins are minimized. Mistakes are amplified. You don't feel psychologically safe to raise real issues. Decisions feel predetermined before the discussion even happens. At that point, you're not working through tension. You're stuck in friction. And then you have to answer a hard question. You have to ask yourself, is this situation I can influence, or is this a system that isn't built to support the way that I work? Now, before you jump to conclusions, you owe it to yourself to check a few things. Have I been clear? Have I tried to build alignment? Have I addressed issues directly and professionally? Have I given enough time to improve? Because again, tension is part of the job. But if nothing changes, if you've done the work, and if the environment doesn't shift and the friction is constant and it's impacting your ability to lead effectively, then it's not just uncomfortable, it's unsustainable. Because there's a difference between being challenged and being stuck in a system that's working against itself. And knowing the difference, that's a part of leadership too. If you're in K-12, whether you're leading it, supporting it, or living it in the classroom, this is the work. If this episode hit home, go ahead and follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And if there's something you want us to dig into or a real-world situation you're working through, we're going to open up that soon. And as we go forward with Chips and Chalk, we're going to keep cutting through the noise. No fluff, no theory without reality, just what actually works in schools. Thanks for listening.